Доброго дня.
So, good afternoon and greetings to our speakers, to all those who are watching us. We start our working day, so let me announce the beginning of the presentation of the analytical report on quasi-legal system on the occupied territories, implementation and the spread of practices. So let me pass the floor to our moderator. Thank you. And we are traditionally grateful to the Ukraine Crisis Media Center for hosting us. My name is Olha Reshetylova. I'm the co-coordinator of the Initiative on the Human Rights. And today it's a big day for us because we are presenting the results of our work over the year. It started under different circumstances, but because of the large-scale invasion, this work has become even more topical. We've changed the topic a bit because we started the analysis of the quasi-legal systems established at the occupied territories before the February of 2022, more specifically the occupied territories on Donbas, but it has become a very valuable issue for us. When the new occupied territories started to appear, we would already understand the processes happening in those territories and what we should expect out of occupation. But let us have more to say from our speakers. Let me introduce those people who were engaged in developing this analytical report and those who practically felt the impact of those quasi-legal systems. So let me start with my counterpart and one of the authors of the report, Tetyana Katrychenko. She's the coordinator of the Media Initiative on Human Rights, and I guess she's one of those experts who perfectly aware of the legal system. And then we have Maksym Tymochko, an officer of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. And before the February 24th, he was, and he remains one of the best experts in Ukraine on the IHL, an expert on human rights, a lawyer from the bar association called Umbrella. So the idea of this report came when we were listening to the Maksym's briefings, and he said that there's not a single research on what is happening with the legal regime on the occupied territories, because many analysts are refusing to analyze those systems in order not to legitimize them. But that sort of limits our understanding of what is happening in those territories. So Maksym was the one who offered the idea behind the research. Then we have one more speaker who felt on her own experience. She's one of the civil detainees, and fortunately she's with us now after spending years detained in the Donetsk People's Republic. She had a chance to communicate with the so-called investigators and the judges of this legal regime, so she will share her experience. And our research, just as other researchers, they're based on the evidences of all those affected by the war crimes and crimes against humanity committed by Russia. And finally, we have Andrii Yakovliev, an expert of the Media Initiative, another lawyer from the Umbrella Association, one of the co-authors of this research. And many of you know him because he's a regular expert. Andrii usually gives us something that you can hardly hear anywhere else in the informational domain. So let me pass the floor to Tetyana Katrychenko, and she'll be able to tell us about the work on this research, and as well as some of the outcomes of this research. So, good afternoon. Thank you, Olha, for introducing us in this way and introducing our organization. I personally analyzed the system of this quasi-legal regime for a couple of years, and over the past 3 years, we have interviewed dozens of former detainees and POWs as we had to tackle with the system on the occupied territory. And then Maksym gave this idea to have a research. We can't say that this is the most profound research. We can say that this is only the beginning of a series of researches on this topic, although after the February 24th, it became evident that the analysis, not only the media initiative, is a fairly topical one, and I would say an important one indeed. And let me give an explanation of what was happening, why this topic is so important. We all remember the 2014 when the occupation started, when those territories that were not under control of the Ukrainian government, the law enforcement agencies were unable to operate, and the courts were unable to operate. They had to evacuate. They had to temporarily, terminate their work, and then to evacuate, to relocate. So we knew that there has to be some other law enforcement agencies or other agencies to replace them in the occupation, and so it happened like that. There was this police, or the national police as they call them, then there is Minister for State Security, then the so-called prosecutor's office, the courts. Now, all that was happening over the past this 8 years, and the procedure for the establishment of those agencies was not implemented at once. I mean, they didn't start working at once. Speaking on the court system and the judicial system, some of the cases were considered not by the courts of the first instance, but the so-called Supreme Court. And that Supreme Court took a couple of years to be established. So what's also important that, clearly the occupying state has to control the system on the occupied territory, has to provide and maintain law and order. And it's hard for us to say what was happening to those cases about murders and burglaries or robberies, but talking about the political cases, and starting from 2014, the civilian population that was not supporting the occupation. At first they were kept in the basements of the administrative buildings, and later on the new detainment facilities were started to be constructed for them. And then there was a factory established with a place for detaining civilians and torturing them. And then the civilians were transferred to more kind of rather official places of detention, like temporary detention facilities or other prisons. Now, going back to this issue that we are doing a lot of interviewing, and we've done dozens of interviews, in fact, and all of them support the fact that this detainment, the first interrogations, the detainment over years, it was all conducted in violation of many other aspects. There was no lawyers at the detainment facility or at the detainment place, and the lawyer could be not invited for several months or years. The lawyers might simply not appear at the court hearing procedures. The court hearing could be done in one day, for example. So over a period of one day, a person could be sentenced to 10, 15, 17, or 30 years. And there were sentences up to 30 years for the Ukrainian military. Now, all of this system produced some documents. There were decisions on the establishment of certain agencies. There were some laws that supposed to be governing the operations in those republics, then the so-called sentences against the citizens and many others. Now, what's important is that the result of this system was the detention, the real tortures, and some very real sentence terms. And there are people, civilians who were detained back in 2016 and are currently remain in prisons or in the detention facilities. Now, so all of that was real. And all that was happening in there for Ukraine and for international community was of no sense. We said that all those sentences do not matter. So for us, it's important to release the person, because in this case, everything would be good for that person. And I heard that people who were sentenced and who were sent to prison, when they returned to Ukraine, they were told that these documents, those sentences, they would be taken into consideration in Ukraine and that would be sent to Ukrainian prison. So we're transferring you to serve your sentence in Ukraine. And it was like two parallel realities. One in the occupation, and the other reality was in Ukraine, that we've denied everything, that nothing was happening in there. And it happened so until the 24th of February, because after the full-scale invasion and occupation, we've seen that in the occupied territories of Kiev region, and they've remained under occupation for a month, but still Russians follow the very same procedure. The law enforcement agencies, they are terminated, then they appoint the so-called leaders of the occupied administrations. Now, we've seen what was happening in the Kherson region that remained under occupation for longer periods. There's the same detentions, then basements, there's prisons, then the relocation or the transfer of the civilians to some, as they call, official detention facilities on the territory of the occupied Crimea, as this is where they've constructed the official detention facilities. And some are transferred to the Russian Federation, or to Rostov, or to the Lefortovo prison in Moscow. So that's a different level, a level of Russian Federation, and they offer the sentences based on the articles of the Criminal Code of Russia. Then there's another example. Why was it so important to focus the attention on all that? Was the death sentence. Like everyone knew that on the occupied territories of Donetsk and Luhansk regions, there was a death sentence. According to their so-called legislation, and my counterparts will tell you more about this legislation, but it provided for a death sentence as well. It was mentioned in the reports of the IOs, but we've never thought, and nobody was actually analyzed whether this death sentence was in fact used. And when after the 24th of February, the whole world heard these sentences delivered to the citizens of UK and US, those death sentences that were proclaimed after the court hearing, everyone was surprised. I mean, nobody knew what to do with that, how to cancel those sentences, whether to hire a lawyer or some sort. But all those people that took the road that all the citizens of Ukraine were using, it became evident that in order to fight, in order to kind of overcome the system, you would need to learn it, you would need to understand the principles behind it, and the fact that the Russians are using the same approach to the newly occupied territory. So you can come up with a certain action plan to make sure you prevent this system from happening on the newly occupied territory. So thank you. Thank you, Tanya. Before passing the word to the next speaker, I have to say that unfortunately we have an air raid alert announced. So we are tracking the information. If there will be missile launches, we will need to go to the bomb shelters. Fortunately, we don't have the information on missile launches. Maybe just yet another attempt by Russians to undermine our activities. But since our event is currently facing the possibility of early termination, I have to say that our report was prepared with the support of the Embassy of Netherlands to Ukraine and Mother program, and thanks to their support, we've managed to organize this research. We've submitted applications to the European Court on Human Rights on a few prisoners in Donbass. We've also communicated with the ICC, and hopefully that during their investigation, the ICC will take into consideration that the armed conflict did not start on the 24th of February, but in fact much earlier. And big thanks to our partners and donors, the Embassy of Netherlands to Ukraine. Hopefully they're watching us, or they will be watching us, because the online event has stopped, and we'll do the recording. Now I'd like to pass the floor to Maksym Tymochko, lawyer and expert on IHL, who is the one who came up with the idea about this report. So thank you for the introduction. I'm not going to talk too much on that. So what was especially comforting and that Liudmyla, she's in Kiev and she was working with us so many, and it's not the achievement of ours, but rather the achievement of our government and all those who liberate our citizens. And surely Liudmyla will tell us more about the role of Ukraine and what else has to be done. But it's a great pleasure, and my dream will come true only when all those people that we're working on will be liberated. Our work is a fairly regular one, and it's a pity that I couldn't be participating in a project for 9 months. So now I'm just slightly engaged in this work. I'm working as the officer of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, but trying to return to this legal aspects. And before the full-scale aggression, there was this idea, and you've overestimated my contribution to this work, because you started working on this research, in fact, 7 years ago. So, the lawyers are doing our job. You just giving us the cases for this job. So what was the idea?
Yes, we are all speaking about the territory of lawlessness where some of the atrocities are taking place. But the information in the media, information among the foreign partners, how the trials are taking place on the occupied territories is not enough. Lots of our partners who are working in Crimea are doing a lot because the process of justice there, quasi-justice, is more or less public. You can follow it, and the people who are following it are risking a lot. But still, there is some information, so you can gain it. But as of the territory of separate regions of Donetsk and Lugansk regions, the newly occupied territories, that is a totally gray zone, and you don't know what is happening and what is taking place there, because as it was appropriately mentioned by my colleague, the lawyers who are present there in the majority of cases are not the people who are helping, but the people who are helping to the accusation part, that is the so-called prosecutors of the LPR and DPR, Luhansk and Donetsk People's Republics. Or maybe there are some of the desperate people who are giving some of the information to the free area, to the free territory, to understand what is happening with the person. Because mostly the lawyers who are taking the role of advocacy, they're just communicators. They can help and just give some piece of news to the relatives to explain what is really helping there. But those are really rare situations. So there was the idea, just look what those so-called investigators are doing, these so-called police and judges are doing who exist there, all of this system, all of those are criminals. And all of that is done within the military armed conflict. All of their activities connected with the occupation, because those people are not... it is connected because the people who are accused, they do not support Russian Federation, they do not support the occupational administrations. Those are war crimes. So our first task was to get more context, to get more facts for the people who will be working on that. I mean both national prosecutors and the prosecutors of the International Criminal Court, maybe even the prosecutors of other countries, if we speak about the universal jurisdiction, for them to have a certain context and understanding of what is really taking place. Well, of course, this research is just a little part of a huge iceberg of the human rights violation on these territories, but it's also important because we are speaking about the war criminals, not only in the context of what the representatives of the armed forces of Russia are doing and their illegal armed formations who are subordinate to them, but we need to speak to the war about the war crimes in the issue of justice. That's who I meant already and mentioned above. The judges who are unfortunately accusing our people, the prosecutors who provide some of the illegal accusations. Liudmyla has this so-called accusation document, which is just impossible to read. This is just some legal nuisance and just usual defamation. What is written there, in fact, she is holding the proof, the evidence of the war crime. What the prosecutors are writing of those so-called quasi-republics is just the participants in war crimes. So to prove those crimes, to show what is taking place there, who is responsible, what is so-called legislation, well, that's why we need it. And this is just the beginning. This is just the little, really little part, which is not enough to launch a huge project of accusation, but still this is the entry point, which we need to take into consideration, and I think that the next stage should be the work on the notifications for the ICC together with the General Prosecutor's Office. This should be the work on the international platforms of the UN, where we research the issues of the right for the just court by the Russian Federation as the occupying country. Because according to the international humanitarian law and the Geneva Conventions, who are well known for the wider audience, they foresee that Russian Federation on the occupied territories by it should provide the minimal guarantees of humanity, not only for the POVs, but for the civilians who are living on these territories. They need to create the mechanisms which would allow people not only to leave this territory, but at least if they want to stay at this territory until it is liberated. It does not take place. And to achieve that, we need to create those reports. We need to show it. First of all, and the most important, is the war crimes, the criminal responsibility and liability of those people, not just for collaborationism, that they betrayed their motherlands, but that they, in fact, judged the people violating the customs of war. And the second element, to provide the claim in front of the Russian Federation in the Human Rights Court, and this report would be important about the interstate cases against Russia, which also research the tortures, the illegal imprisonment, and the violation of the right for the just court according to the Convention on Human Rights. This is an important work. We have started it and we are going on with it, and I hope that after demobilization and our victory, I will join this wonderful team to help them in this. Thank you so much. Yes, he's modest, in fact. Thank you, Maksym. In fact, he's involved even being in the armed forces with his comments and remarks. So we thank you so much, both for the service and for the ability to help even from there. Liudmyla, I'm also so happy that we are able to give you the floor. We were really expecting and waiting for this moment when we can meet you directly, when we can talk to you and to hear you directly what is really taking place there, how this quasi-legal system is acting, and which consequences it leads to. So, Liudmyla Huseinova, please. Thank you. First and foremost, that these facts are becoming public, that we are speaking about that loud and clear. I have taken part, and I will take part in some of the events, not just for the sake of justice about me, but also because there are lots of women and men there who are civilians and who are still in those incredible hell conditions. I personally collected 28 names of women which are now in Donetsk detention center and in Luhansk region. I know some of them personally, and some of them are acquainted with the women who were in the big exchange batch together with me. Those women are staying there since 2017, 2018 and 19. They are sitting there without any trials, without courts. As of one of the girls, she was so intimidated that at some moment, when she could cross, when we could meet her during the walk or going to, I told her, write some of the complaints, at least to Morozova. Whatever is our attitude, but we need to do something. You are sitting here for 4 years and nothing is taking place. There is no investigation going on. The person is just sitting locked in the chamber. They forgot about her, but she's so intimidated in isolation that she's even afraid to do that. She is just humbly sitting there, and she's waiting for liberation when Ukraine is coming for her and liberating her out of that room. I know a lady, a woman who cannot achieve the change of lawyer, the replacement of the lawyer, because when her relatives hired a different lawyer, not the one of the so-called Ministry of State Security, she was really intimidated, she was blackmailed, and finally she had a secret case created, not to have a single chance to have at least some independent lawyer at all. And the secret case was registered because she posted and was subscribed for Mr. Arseyev in the social network. If you subscribe in the Arseyev in the social network, you are already the state criminal and you have a secret case registered. When I was arrested, well, of course, what lawyer could I imagine? They brought me to the isolation. And there I communicated with the women locked there about the lawyers. They told me that there are 3 lawyers who are allowed to the cases by the Ministry of State Security. You cannot involve others. One of the women told that her mother hired a different lawyer. She was taken to the so-called investigator of the ministry, and she was ordered to refuse from the independent lawyer. She said that she wouldn't refuse, but they began to beat her, and they beat her so hard that she had to refuse. And then she had the lawyer who was appointed by the investigator. And when in a month after stay at isolation, I was brought to the investigator, and he named a surname and asked whether I know the person. I said I didn't. He said, that is your a lawyer hired by your sister. Honestly speaking, I was really scared because I understood that they will begin beating me. So maybe I thought that I should refuse from the services of this lawyer, or maybe let it be how it will be. But thankfully, my lawyer, somehow, well, I cannot say that he was totally independent, but he was able to make a deal with them. He was there, of course, he's paid, but still, he told that we won't fight, because there's no sense to fight. You liked something, you wrote something in the social media. There is no sense, you will not be free, and you will not have the proper verdict, so Just sign whatever is given to you, and then we will hope for the exchange. That was 2019. I hoped that there will be soon an exchange. But it was too long. It was delayed for 3 years. I didn't have anything to defy, because I was, in fact, accused of having pro-Ukrainian position, that I expressed this position in the open way, in the social network, in Facebook. I was not hiding, it was the open page. They wrote in their accusatory and indictment conclusion to include that I was keeping to my pro-Ukrainian views and publicly disseminating information aimed to discredit the residents of the Luhansk People's Republics and the residents of Russian Federation. That was done because I wrote that Vyborg was the second biggest city of Finland in 1939, and now it's the Russian shithole. This was the post in the Facebook. And it is in my conclusion to indict. And similar posts were in the indictment. When we found out that there won't be exchanges, the investigation stopped. And when I was brought to the detention center in Donetsk, I wrote the diaries and I wrote down what took place, though nothing took place in fact. Everything was the same every day. And we were even laughing with each other that it was the seasonal work. Once per autumn, when you were brought to the investigator, once per summer, you were brought to the investigator, and sometimes they just brought you out of the gate of the detention center, and they put always the bags onto your head, and till they take you to the transport, the investigator is coming closer to the gate, he's giving you the blank sheet of paper to sign, and that's it. You don't know what that is. What does it matter to you? You should sign. Of course, as you are handcuffed with the bag on your head, you don't have any other choice. You sign it. In 2 years, finally, they concluded their investigation process and gave the case to the court. And I managed to make a photo of the verdict of the so-called Supreme Court of the so-called Donetsk People's Republic. And the court proceedings took place without my presence. There was not even my lawyer. And the Supreme Court wrote, I have the photo evidence about that the article which I was accused for, that is espionage, should lead either to the life term or to the execution. And as for women, execution is not done. And they cannot name my surname, patronymic and name. They cannot use execution against me. So the Supreme Court cannot put me to trial. So they're giving the case to the inter-rayon court. In half a year, without any of the notifications, they took me to the inter-rayon Voroshilov court. I didn't know even that the court would take place. I was not getting ready to it. I didn't know that it will take place. There was a lawyer there, the judge, the prosecutor, and I told that the thing that I am accused of, the so-called extremism, that I posted those articles in Facebook, that I have pro-Ukrainian position, I do not defy it. That's true. It is true. But the thing that I am accused in espionage, I totally defy that. The judge asked me, why didn't you defy that when you were in the isolation or in the detention center? And I said that I was trying to defy that, that's true. But the investigator told me, I was there already, when in half a year I was told that I'm accused of espionage. And then the investigator told me, if you defy that, you will go to the isolation, to the detention center again. I chose the detention center because I wanted to survive. And I wanted to let all of you know what is really taking place there. And again, I repeat, I'm not doing that for myself. I'm doing that for the men and the women who are still staying there without any court and investigation, without court trial, who are being blackmailed. We did not say that we are convicts. We said that, and they called us, those convicts. No, we were not convicts. We are not in jailed. We were hostages. We were just hostages who don't have a single right, who don't have the proper lawyer and defense. So I have some of the hopes and expectations that thanks to all of you, we will help those women and men and everyone who took part in these lawless actions should be punished. Thank you so much. Thank you, Liudmyla, that you're sharing these evidence. This is incredibly important because, on one hand, this is just theory, but it's totally different when we hear it from the eyewitness who lived through that. And honestly speaking, it was really scary for me that you understood that it is still ongoing with some people, even during this very moment. Thank you so much for that. Andrii, could you please tell, can we say that these forced disappearance, the illegal keeping of civilians, is the tool of the occupational authority for those quasi-legal systems? Can we say that it is just a systematic method? And in fact, what are your comments to what was mentioned by Liudmyla? Thank you for the question. I was sitting and thinking, I was listening to the story again, and, you know, when we took this research, first of all, it's about people who are living under this system. Some of them are just living, some of them are under arrest, but some time passes, and it is a very substantial part of time. The system exists, a kind of the demarcation lane, and we are complaining that our courts are not the best, but but working with our courts you can complain or even shout at the judge. Sometimes our judges are even taken to the garbage, or at least they used to be thrown to the garbage. But on the other hand, this is the different system, and the people who don't have a single right are living there. In fact, it's really scary. That was properly mentioned by Tetyana in the beginning, that it has some of the specific consequences, and we understand that when we speak about execution. The second aspect is that when we're speaking about just the crimes committed by the Russian Federation, they can be of several types.
Well, the first, and we can see that there is the ruination of this country, and everyone see those crimes. But these crimes are happening inside the occupied territories. At the stage of establishment of the judicial system or their own agencies. Maksym said that there's this evidence of committing war crime, and failing to ensure there's human rights, failing to provide for the establishment of the court, failing to establish certain standards and to include the right to a lawyer. This is a war crime. The other aspect, which is very important, that we thought there would be a question somehow similar to Moldova and Transnistria, because Transnistria is the occupied territory, and Russian Federation sometimes attempts to prove that the courts established on their territories are legal, are valid, and the Europeans are sometimes verifying the validity of those courts. And there was a recent case that resulted in the establishment of the fact that there is a valid legal system in Transnistria, and now the European Court is considering the cases where, but that nothing has changed as long as the occupation of Transnistria continues. But the very same situation might happen in the east. So we understood this has to be researched. Now, going back to this question that Olha has raised. we can see that there is this constitution, and it's mentioned in our analysis, in our report. So it appears there's all the branches of power. There's there's courts, there's prosecutors, there's lawyers. But what they've written is in fact not related to the reality. I mean, from the procedural standpoint, they try to comply with everything. They're asking, as Liudmyla have said, you need to sign this, you need to sign that, so they don't issue the sentence right away. They try to comply with certain procedure. So the Russian Federation is using its own hierarchical system in order to legalize its own behavior. It's not just arresting the person. It behaves as if certain procedures are complied with, and it's not just someone arrested the person, but there is a court, and the arrest was done for committing certain cases. Remember that case against the UK citizen, and people were saying, well, the court ruled out in that way, they have a system like that. So then a question comes up that actually Russian Federation is legalizing its presence there through the judicial system, through the judicial and law enforcement system. And there's one more aspect. Whenever we're talking to the other countries or inside the society, we have to understand that it's bad not only when Russia attacks or commits the crime of aggression, but when it creates its own law and order on the occupied territory. So that's a separate crime. And earlier thought that Ukraine would be captured and then that's it. And he would need to leave with that in February. And our report, it shows that nothing's going to change. So this evil, it continues to exist not only at the very beginning when the territories are being captured, but it continues to stay. It spreads around. So you need to counter that. And aggression is one thing, but these consequences of aggression, which are happening later on, they're also very important. So that would be my answer to your question. Thank you very much. Maksym, I thought you wanted to compliment. Yes, indeed. He mentioned the death sentence, and Liudmyla also mentioned the death sentence. And it all started with this type of sentence. Then the idea was that the Russian Federation, as a party to a European Convention, has to comply with the principles on all the territories it provides effective control over. So on the occupied territories, it exercises effective control, and there's no doubts about this. So on this territory, Russia would have to do everything to prevent this type of sentences, like a death sentences. It's prohibited by the European Convention. So not a single European state party to a convention can have this type of sentence as a death sentence. So it's strictly prohibited in accordance to the convention. And this prohibition, this ban, was not lifted in those quasi-republic, which is the direct violation. It's or as we sometimes call it, a blatant violation. And the fact of having this type of sentence is already a violation. I'm not talking about the fact that it was used against Liudmyla, meaning there was a court ruling or an indictment that involved the death sentence. There's this, kind of an illusion of legal disputes that are being settled at the level of Supreme Court, whether they will be having a death sentence or not. That's even unthinkable. I mean, they're deciding on whether a death sentence should be rolled out against a person in the 21st century. Now, this is what we are fighting against. I agree with Andrew. That's the territory of evil, and we need to do something with that. And we, the lawyers, on our own legal battlefield, we have to wage a war, and I thank you for this. Thank you. Now let's recall, where did they get this death sentence in the quasi-republic? they took it out of the criminal code of the Russian Federation that remained valid after some period of time. And since if the Russian Federation has no death sentence on its territory, but it can use the death sentence on the quasi-republics they've established. Am I right? Well, they seem to have the death sentence, but it's under moratorium. And on the territory of the quasi-republics, Russians try to implement this. So, and there's a good example of having a society impacting on that. And I think that it's thanks to the communication of the society that we're not seeing those court hearings resulting in the death penalty, and that has a sense. I mean, the interest around this topic is of an important aspect. And whenever Maksym told about the effective control, it's not that we're talking about something similar to the good management. It means that someone has to take accountability or responsibility for violating human rights. Thank you very much. Let me remind our audience that there was an attempt to have this court hearing procedures against the Ukrainian servicemen, particularly the service personnel of the Azov regiment, but after the publicity pressure and after the pressure from the international community, they decided not to have those court hearings, finally understood that that would be a blatant violation. Liudmyla and Tetyana told a lot about the role of the lawyers in this under this quasi-legal system. And one of our achievements is that we've managed to interview some of the lawyers who continue to work on the occupied territory. Unfortunately, we can't give their names, but their interviews are included into this report. So, Tetyana, question to you. What is the role of the lawyers? Any function they perform, and whether they're coming from in this quasi-legal system? Well, the courts and the lawyers, they're the sort of brightest representatives of the system. And they showcase the system. The lawyers are the people who remained working on the occupied territory after 2014. These are the people with lawyers' IDs. And someone stopped their activity as a lawyer. Someone just continued working on the occupied territories. So there's the so-called register of the lawyers that's in the Donetsk People's Republic, and there was one in the Luhansk People's Republic. But it's important to realize that those lawyers, after being included into the register, when they have received some sort of IDs on the this People's Republic, those who decided not to receive those IDs, they could operate on those territories. They're called experts in the field of law. They could participate in certain processes that were not related to political cases. But speaking about political detainees, now there was, and there is, a certain number of lawyers, kind of a lawyer which is also a prosecutor. Well, formerly they were called lawyers, and they formally participated in the process, and at a certain stage they met with their customer, so-called customer, which was not happening during the first weeks or during the first month of detainment. Now, those lawyers, they were allowed, since before the 24th of February, most of the cases were considered by the Ministry for State Security, so they could go to this ministry, and the ministry allowed them to work, and there was Elena Shishkina, one of these lawyers. She's a Ukrainian lawyer, but she decided to stay in the occupied territories, and she started working as the lawyer of the Ministry for State Security. Then she participated in the tribunal that offered a sentence against the fifth president of Ukraine, Petro Poroshenko. Then she wanted to, or she participated in the election process at the head of the republic. But there's other lawyers like Vesnyana, Alina Strenyenko, Akopyana. So these are the lawyers that serve the role, or fulfill the role of a prosecutor. There are people who tend to have a more human approach to their clients, but they respond something similar to what Liudmyla have heard, that all you need is to sign everything, and the least what they can do is to inform the family of the detained person that this detained person is alive, and they can pass on some products or anything during the next meeting, and they're kind of free of charge. But during the second meeting, they're already telling the relatives that if they want us to continue working, then they would have to pay those lawyers. And in this case, we can continue communicating, we could continue informing on the condition of this detained person. And under this scheme, or the mechanism, that was sort of the mechanism for the lawyers to operate in the Kherson region. And the same mechanism is established in the occupied Crimea with regards to the new civilian detainees transferred to Crimea from the Kherson region and Zaporizhia region. There's a couple of dozens of them. I have a question to the lawyers from the standpoint of the national legislation. Do their activity can their activity be considered as the crime in accordance to our legislation? Well, I believe that this is a rather controversial issue, because there's the concept on the protection of the lawyers, and it is considered that the lawyers have to work, but there is internal legislation that requires to comply with it. Now, on the one hand, there is a debate in the society that all of these lawyers have to be banned. I'm not saying that's wrong, but we have to take into account that, for example, someone was visiting Liudmyla and at least received some of the information. Someone is working as the second prosecutor. I mean, lawyer as the second prosecutor, meaning, and judge operates as a prosecutor. Prosecutor operates as a prosecutor, and the same for the lawyers. On the other hand, we need to make sure there's no violations of the national legislation. Now, in accordance to those amendments to the legislation, all the lawyers are considered as collaborationists. That's a collaborationism, which is something like decriminalization of the state treason. But we have to be very careful, particularly in terms of territories under control of Russia. One of the lawyers said that in Russia you would need a lawyer simply to visit the detained person, so that everyone would know that this person is still alive. But it's not only the family knows that the detained person is alive, and besides, in prisons, the rest of the convicts, the detainees, they know that people are coming to this person and they shouldn't hit him. So that was a kind of a deterrent factor. So we need to search for a balance. For example, we will ban all the lawyers. Now, who's going to do some help to our detainees, to captured people? Well, theoretically, someone went to Liudmyla or visited Liudmyla. In some cases, the lawyers are representative of the executive authorities. For example, Yarov, his not surely a lawyer, but operates as a representative of the executive authorities. What's the task of the court? He serves as an arbiter, and there's the prosecution side who argues on the crime, and then there's the defendant who defends himself. Now, under this condition, well, the judge may take a just decision. When there is a lawyer, then there isn't a lawyer, then surely any decision, any court rulings could not be considered as justified. Now, what do we need to do with those lawyers? I would like to say that there was this question about this future court hearings, that there's no sense and there would be no positive ruling. But I'm grateful to my lawyer because he managed to kind of save me from that isolation. He explained me the conditions on the detainment facilities, how should I behave, what should I do, and I'm very grateful to him for that, because without that support, I mean, anyone of you, if you will be held into a cell with 20 killers, fraudsters, and other criminals, you don't know how to behave yourself. What do you need to do? What do you have to do? What you must not do? So I'm grateful to the lawyer for this moral support as well, because this is the only person whom I saw over those years. I mean, not every day, not every week or month, but he visited me regularly. I was not allowed to have meetings with my sister, so he passed on some information from me to her, and vice versa. I knew what was happening. I knew that there could be an exchange, and I continued living only by knowing that. And I know that he did a lot to confirm my existence in that temporary detention facility, because nobody confirmed my presence in that facility. And I know that during the negotiation on the exchanges, there were conversations and questions about me, and nobody confirmed my existence in that detention facility. So he did everything possible to get some certificates from the medical ward, to have some papers that I'm there, I'm still alive, I'm still kept there. So this such a behavior of the collaboration is, and you know, there's different people. There are different lawyers. There were different people who served as the wardens or the security officers. But there was a woman. She was working there, and so she took me with my hand, and she said, "I'm praying for you."
I'm really grateful to her, and I do hope that I will be able to tell her the same words personally, because it's so important to have some kind of support. Well, you know, let me add, I thought that, in fact, the role of the human rights activists is serious, and it is protected by the international law. It cannot be oppressed. So I thought that maybe we need to develop a system how the lawyers should behave under the occupation conditions. Because there is the principles. If there are no rules, people will behave really badly, some 10% of them. 10% will behave properly and perfectly, and 80% will behave according to the situation. So we need to think how to create the rules for the majority of the people to stick to them. And now we would like to prohibit everything, but we do not do anything instead of that. We do not give them anything instead of that. And Liudmyla just told how it is important. It shouldn't excuse the system. It shouldn't, in fact, acquit the system. But it is going on for a long time, and some rules are needed, really. Thank you. Thank you so much. I would like to make you aware that the broadcast is working already. If you have the questions, and you can post them in the comments, and I will post those questions. Tetyana, now it's your turn finally. I just have a short remark. Out of my experience of surveys among the civilians and hostages who were liberated in the exchanges of 2018 and 19, and also before that, I may say that Liudmyla, to some extent, is lucky. It was an exclusion of the rules when the lawyer was trying to act within certain limits not to harm to himself and to help Liudmyla. And it is also important to understand, because the lawyers whose surnames I listed above and other lawyers were really, and we have dozens of evidence, they were acting like prosecutors. Because after the isolation, after the tortures by the electric power, the lawyer came, a so-called lawyer, and the person who lived through these tortures is telling the lawyer that I was tortured by the electrical power. And the lawyer pretends that he does not hear and does not see that, or just is saying, okay, I'll let them know. Or he said, you're telling I was locked, I was in the basement, they did not give me water, they did not let me get to the toilet. And the lawyer answers, but what can I do? You are a political prisoner. So we need to say that there should be certain rules or maybe restrictions. Not how they act, but how we perceive their actions. But simultaneously we understand that there are some people who acted not to protect the ones which they had to protect. And appointing such lawyers, Russian Federation and controlled authorities by Russia tried to legitimize, to make this process legal. And it's important that lawyer existed just for the name of a lawyer, and for some procedural documents to mention this surname. But in fact, this lawyer is in particular one of those who took part in the tortures. Maybe he was not the one who tortured directly, but if he was notified about that and he did not take any measures, that is a crime as well. The same can be told about the judges when in the closed court trials the witnesses are saying that they mentioned about tortures and the judge and the lawyer never responded. There were some violations, and the court political trials were always closed. In the beginning, even before 2017, when there were some kind of compromise, when there were some of the UN mission representatives there, they could get to some of the meeting or maybe could sit in the hall and listen to it. It was the only kind of presence there. After that, approximately after 2017, those court trials have become fully closed, and we can only get to know about what was happening there listening to the words of the witnesses. And we can speak about the system, because all of those witnesses, in spite of the year, in spite of the circumstances of detention, they say almost the same. For 70% of them are saying the same. Thank you so much. We're almost out of time, so I wanted to speak about the second part of our research, which started after the full-scale invasion, that is about the parallels, how the foundation of the quasi-legal republics and the occupational authorities took place at the newly occupied territories, and which parallels we can draw between the foundation of quasi-legal republics since 2014 on the occupied territory of Donbas, and speaking about southern regions of Ukraine, Kherson and Zaporizhia regions, where unfortunately occupation is taking place for a long time as well. Tetyana, could you start? Yes, okay, I already mentioned this topic. So we can see that in 2014, if you disagree with the occupation, hundreds of civilians were taken under detention. The same happened in Kyiv, Chernihiv, Sumy regions, and Kharkiv region, and the same is taking place now in Kherson region, Zaporizhia, partially Mykolaiv region. That is why we understand that then they will act how they used to act in the occupation of Donetsk and Luhansk regions. Everything started with the bags on the heads, on the tortures with electricity, or with the people kept in the basements. Maybe some people were let go, or maybe were not. They used to have more control to keep people on the occupied territories of Donetsk and Luhansk regions. And now Russian Federation is not sure whether they can keep people in Kherson region. That's why they found the way out. They are bringing them closer to the occupied Crimea, to Chaplinka, for instance, and from Chaplinka they can be transported further to the Crimea. And some of the people are just they have the detention center number 2 there, where people don't have a single status. Some people have the status, some people are accused of countering the special military operation, some of them are accused in the acts of international terrorism. Then they are brought to Rostov region or Lefortovo prison. So knowing what took place in Donetsk and Luhansk regions in 2014, we can foresee what is taking place now on the occupied territories, because 10 months of occupation is a long period of time. And what can happen then if those territories don't want to speak about that and won't be liberated about that? Maksym, I have a question. What is changing in the legal terms after the de facto annexation, that is, joining the Russian Federation? Will it influence how we consider those war crimes? As of my opinion, Olga, the fact of so-called annexation only helps us to prove. We all remember this moment, something like uncertainty of 2014, and the international partners had doubts about qualification of the conflict at the east. But we, from our side, were proving and collecting evidence about the efficient control, and to show that economically, politically, and militarily this support is so powerful, it is so holistic at this territory, that you cannot say that Russia is not there. They always used to be there since 2014, and they are staying there still. The thing that they annexed these territories just confirm after our long-year statements. And it witnesses again that those are the territories which are fully controlled by them. If they have a control, there is the responsibility of the state. If there is the responsibility of the state, then we can claim that at the international level. And let us not forget about the level of individual criminal liability. Those are certain people, certain military servicemen, state officials. Let's not forget that the war crimes are not only about servicemen, it's about the civilians, the chiefs, the judges, prosecutors, investigators. And going on with the previous question, we have some experience of monitoring of Crimea, what is taking place there. We know the names, we know the places. To some extent, it's even good that we know it, because during that many years we delved deeper into that. Lots of our colleagues are dealing with that now. And in comparison with the territory, which is a total gray area now, we can see something there and understand it. It's good that we find out such cases when the person doesn't have any status. We don't know anything about him or her, but we have some of the message that he or she is kept somewhere. Unfortunately, we forgot to speak about some of the awful violations. Well, we can consider that this is the violation of the right for the just court, but in fact this is the murder. This is the execution without court. We do remember the Ukrainian POWs who were killed by the so-called troops of Don and Wagner formations. We remember their executions. We remember Roman Bespali, who was killed in one of the colonies of the so-called DPR. We remember lots of civilians who were unfortunately who were killed by the occupiers on the occupied territories. This is also the sign that they don't have the system which should have been created by the occupiers on these territories. So coming back to the question, annexation just confirms the crime, and it does not legalize the situation at all. Let me add a bit. In fact, in Crimea, we had the same. The judges saw how the convicts were brought with the bags on their heads, and they could be bleeding on their faces. Nobody paid attention to that. So I thought that Crimea is what Russia wanted to do with the people who do not agree with them. But the east, the occupied territories of Luhansk and Donetsk regions, is how Russia would like to look like in the future. Because that's what they state about, that they need the policy, that it does not concern us only, it concerns them. In Donetsk and Luhansk regions, they created what they will have in Russia later. That's my opinion. That's what they are striving for. Russia pretends as if they have some legalizing procedures, but in fact the same people just took off their masks and are fighting against the people who disagree with them. This is political prosecution, and all of this system is just the understanding of the Russia, how it will look like in the future. Thank you. This is about the practice. If we're speaking about the masks and efficient control, in this research we also mentioned that since 2014, in the so-called DPR and LPR, Russia was trying to mask their presence. And it seems to me the head of the Supreme Court, who is the citizen of Russia, was as if liberated or was fired by the system, the legal system of Russian Federation, and appointed by the one by Lugansk People's Republic. But at the newly occupied territories, we do not see this masking. We can see the Russian Investigation Committee and other investigators present there. They stopped masking. Why did they need that masking in 2014? What do you think? Well, the criminals would also always like to hide, to conceal their participants. The same happens about the armed formation of Wagner. Why did they always hide their connection with Russian Federation, and now they are openly organizing mobilization to this criminal organization? Just to be distant from Russia, to create the legal collisions, some of the obstacles, to have a discussion whether they are really the agents of Russia or they've never been. This is the ancient policy of our adversary, of our enemy. This is very typical for any criminal, because this so-called head of the Supreme Court of DPR is the former employee of the investigative committee. We see that, we understand that. If they would like to create this illusion as if to be distant from the liability, from responsibility, I would say that they will fail in that. Thank you for this optimism. If anyone has any questions, please post them in the comments section. And I'd like to ask Liudmyla whether you had any cases when you communicated with the representatives of the law enforcement of Russian Federation. Did they explain their objectives? Did they mention why they were keeping you, what they wanted to achieve? As of the representatives of Russian Federation, no, I did not communicate with them directly. During these 3 years, I did not communicate with the investigators as well. I told you that those were seasonal meetings only. And now, if I calculate how many times I communicated with them at all, I had, by the way, 2 investigators. First one, Alexei. Then the young guy was taken in the end of my term. So maybe that was about 7 or 8 times, not more. So they did not explain me anything. Even when in half of the year they decided to accuse me of espionage, they did not even explain what for. And did not give me any paper to sign. They just brought me to the investigator, took off the bag from my head in the office of the investigator already, and he told, I would like to inform you that you also have one more article, additional article to the previous ones. I had 2 articles for extremism, and I asked him, what article? Espionage. What for? What does it matter? They put me the bag on my head again and goodbye. This was our communication and the explanation that I have one more article. I would like to say that what took place during this summer when in so-called republics they conducted the so-called referendum about the joining to the Russian Federation, and we were warned to put proper clothes because in half of the hour we would be brought along the hall to the office for us to take part in the voting process. I asked if I don't want to take part, it does not matter, but I will not go. No, you will go. And then you understand that you will go. Otherwise, they will not invite you personally. So when they brought us there, I even told, in my judgment of indictment, you wrote that I am the foreign citizen. I am the citizen of Ukraine. How can I take part in that? It doesn't matter, they said. So when I was brought to that office, there were 2 people with sticks. One of them, a lawyer, was sitting at the table. There were the forms to fill on the table, and the urn to vote was on the table as well. I took the balloting and I wanted to throw it. No. He was showing where I should sign with his finger. I did what I had to do, because I wouldn't respect myself after that. I took this sheet of paper and I wrote that I'm against joining Russia. Well, of course, they used some of the obscene words against me, because if I even communicated to any of the Russians, they were speaking with obscene words only. They pushed me. I was afraid that there could be consequences. They could take me to the chamber. Well, how could it be worse? During the last half of the year, we did not have any sun, we did not have any light, because there was a stone wall behind the window, so you did not know if there is anything at the street or not. So I would like to say that there was one more woman from my chamber who was really afraid. But somehow we became friends, and I told her, Olga, don't, because you understand what could happen with the consequences. But she overcame her fear, and she did the same as I did. That's what we acted, but we were so scared. Every day when the door was opening, you were already trembling, because who knows what happens next. I was lucky, because soon the exchange took place. But I'm still worried for her. I really ask again and again, being liberated, I would like to not to forget about those ladies and men who are staying there. Thank you.
Thank you, Liudmyla, for your position. We do hope that all those illegally detained will join us, and they would survive this period of time. It's of a crucial importance that we can hear this information. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you have any questions, then please ask them. If not, we will finish this event. Maksym wants to offer the some aspects. After the 24th of February, unfortunately, we've lost contact with many people that we've contacted with. I don't know if they will be watching this event, or maybe they're following you on. But I dream of them reaching out to me, because there were whole families contacting with us, and whose husbands we've tried to protect and defend, but they've all disappeared. went off radar. We don't know what happened to them, what's happening on that territory, and I sincerely hope that they would learn about the fact that we continue working. There's human rights organizations ready to help. So that's the ending phrase that I have. So if you're watching us, or if you know with whom we've worked before the full-scale aggression, please ask them to communicate with us. Of course, we'll ensure the proper protection, but we'd like to continue with their protection and defense, and we want to help them. So it was the media initiative to support the human rights. We've presented a research that we've been doing for a while. It's called the quasi-legal system on the occupied territory, the implementation and the spread of practices. The second part that was finally published after the full-scale aggression. So we had a chance to do that thanks to the support that we've received from the Embassy of Netherlands to Ukraine and the Matra program. Thank you for supporting such ideas, such brave projects. We are grateful to those people who agreed to offer their information. It's very important that they're sharing their experience, and based on that experience, we understand what is happening in the plans of Russian Federation and how to tackle them. And I'm grateful to the authors of this report who made a colossal work. And I believe that we'll continue with this topic. Just yesterday we had a conversation with Maksym, and he has ideas as to how to proceed. So hopefully that all of our experts that are currently serving in the armed forces of Ukraine and other uniformed services will return to this work, and they've been trained to do that so hard, and will return to us their expertise. We're really lacking that expertise. So thank you to those watching.